The sun cast long, unforgiving shadows across the barren landscape as Josephine Zimmerman staggered through the scorching heat of the Nevada desert. Her once fine dress now tattered and stained with the dirt of a 3-day journey on foot. The year was 1875, and she had lost everything: her family, her home, and now, it seemed, her very will to survive. The town of Cherry Creek shimmered like a mirage in the distance, its promise of salvation growing dimmer with each faltering step. Josephine's lips were cracked and bleeding, her water canteen empty for nearly a day. Her vision began to blur as the merciless summer heat beat down upon her head. Just a little farther, she whispered to herself, but her body had other ideas. The world tilted sideways, the dusty ground rushing up to meet her as her knees buckled beneath the weight of exhaustion and despair. As consciousness slipped away, the last thing Josephine saw was a plume of dust on the horizon and the silhouette of a rider approaching. Owen Drake had not planned to visit Cherry Creek that day. His ranch lay 10 miles north of town, and he typically made the journey only once a month for supplies. But his prized stallion had thrown a shoe, and the blacksmith in Cherry Creek was the only one he trusted within 50 miles. He spotted the fallen figure from a distance, a splash of faded blue fabric against the golden-brown earth. Pulling on the reins, he directed his horse toward the motionless form. "Hello there," Owen called out, dismounting with a practiced ease that came from years in the saddle. When he received no response, he approached cautiously, his hand instinctively hovering near the revolver at his hip. The Nevada territory could be dangerous, and caution had kept him alive for his 30 years. What he found, however, was no threat. A woman, unconscious and clearly in desperate condition, lay face down in the dirt. Owen knelt beside her, gently turning her over. Her face, though smudged with dust and marked by exposure to the elements, was striking. Dark lashes rested against pale cheeks, and her chestnut hair had partly come loose from what must have once been an elegant updo. "Miss, can you hear me?" he asked, touching her wrist to find a pulse. It was there, but faint and fluttering like a trapped bird. Owen glanced around, seeing no wagon, no horse, no companions, nothing to explain her presence miles from town in such a state. He had little choice. Cherry Creek was too far, and the woman clearly needed immediate care. With a decision made, Owen carefully lifted her slight form into his arms and placed her on his horse before mounting behind her. He cradled her unconscious body against his chest, one arm secure around her waist as he took the reins with the other hand. "Hold on, miss," he murmured, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "I've got you." Owen's ranch house came into view after an hour's ride, a sturdy 2-story structure built of local timber and stone. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid, a testament to his decade of hard work since coming west after the war. A small creek ran behind the property, feeding the vegetable garden and providing water for his modest herd of cattle. His ranch hand, Miguel Vasquez, rushed from the barn as Owen approached with the unconscious woman. "Senor Drake, what happened?" Miguel asked, his weathered face creased with concern. "Found her collapsed about 2 miles from town," Owen explained, carefully dismounting while supporting the woman. "She's in bad shape. Fetch some clean water and bring it to the spare room." Miguel nodded and hurried to comply while Owen carried his unexpected guest into the house. The spare bedroom was simple but clean, with a bed covered in a handmade quilt, a small dresser, and a washstand. Owen laid the woman down gently, removing her dusty boots and loosening the high collar of her dress to help her breathe easier. Miguel appeared with a pitcher of water and clean cloths. "Should I ride for the doctor, senor?" Owen assessed the woman's condition. Her breathing seemed steadier now, though her skin was hot to the touch. "Not yet. Let's see if we can get her to wake first. Bring me some of that willow bark tea that helped your fever last winter." After Miguel departed, Owen dipped a cloth in cool water and began to gently clean the dust from the woman's face. As the dirt gave way, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, perhaps in her early 20s. There was a delicate refinement to her features that spoke of Eastern breeding, not the hardened look of frontier women. "Who are you?" he wondered aloud. And what devil's chase brought you here alone? Owen continued his ministrations, bathing her face and hands with cool water. He hesitated when it came to her clothing, propriety warring with practical concern. In the end, he compromised by loosening her dress further and using a damp cloth to cool her neck and arms without undressing her. Miguel returned with the tea, setting the steaming cup on the bedside table. My wife says she will come tomorrow to help with the señorita. It is not proper for men alone. Owen nodded his thanks. Miguel's wife, Elena, was a godsend in matters like this. Tell her we'll be grateful for her help. As the afternoon turned to evening, Owen maintained his vigil. He spooned small amounts of water between the woman's parched lips, noting with relief that she seemed to swallow reflexively. The color was gradually returning to her cheeks, and her breathing had deepened into what appeared to be natural sleep rather than unconsciousness. It was near midnight when her eyelids finally fluttered open. Owen had dozed in the chair beside the bed, but woke instantly at her movement. Her eyes were the color of summer skies, a startling blue that seemed out of place in her dust-worn face. They widened in alarm as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings and the bearded stranger at her bedside. "It's all right," Owen said quickly, keeping his voice low and gentle. "You're safe. I found you collapsed outside of Cherry Creek." The woman attempted to sit up but fell back with a groan, one hand flying to her head. Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse from thirst. "My ranch, about 10 miles north of town," Owen explained, offering her water. "I'm Owen Drake. Can you tell me your name?" She accepted the water gratefully, drinking slowly as he supported her head. "Josephine," she whispered after a moment. "Josephine Zimmerman. Miss Zimmerman, you were in pretty bad shape when I found you. What happened? Were you traveling alone?" A shadow passed across her face and Owen could see her gathering her strength to speak. "I was traveling from Sacramento. The stagecoach was robbed 3 days ago. The bandits took everything, my trunk, my money." Her voice faltered. "They killed the driver and the guard. I ran. I've been walking ever since, hiding at night." Owen's jaw tightened at the mention of bandits. The Blackwell gang had been terrorizing the territory for months, growing bolder with each success. "Rest now," he advised, seeing the exhaustion in her eyes. "We can talk more tomorrow. You're safe here." Josephine's gaze held his for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether she could trust his word. Whatever she saw in his steady brown eyes must have reassured her, for she nodded slightly before allowing her eyelids to drift closed again. Owen remained in the chair for a time, watching as her breathing evened out in sleep. There was something about this woman that stirred his protective instincts and perhaps something more, something he hadn't felt in a very long time. The following morning, Elena Vasquez arrived early, her apron pockets filled with herbs and remedies. She shooed Owen from the sick room with firm instructions to see to his neglected ranch work. "The señorita needs a woman's care now," she insisted, "and fresh clothing. I have brought some things that may fit." Owen reluctantly complied, recognizing the wisdom in Elena's approach. He spent the morning checking fences in the north pasture, but his thoughts continually drifted back to the house and its mysterious guest. By midday, his curiosity got the better of him. He returned to find Elena in the kitchen, stirring a pot of hearty stew. "How is she?" he asked, washing trailed dust from his hands at the basin. Elena's expression was approving. "Better than expected. The young lady has strength in her, despite her delicate appearance. She is resting now, but she ate a little broth and spoke sensibly. No fever." Owen nodded, relieved. "Did she say anything about what happened?" "Only that she is grateful for your help." "It is her story to tell, Señor, when she is ready." Elena gave him a knowing look. "She is very beautiful, no?" Owen felt an unexpected warmth in his face. "I was more concerned with her health than her appearance, Elena." The older woman's laugh followed him as he retreated to his office to review the ranch accounts, a task he usually dreaded but now welcomed as a distraction. It was late afternoon when a soft knock on the doorframe drew his attention. Josephine Zimmerman stood there, transformed from the half-dead woman he'd rescued. Her chestnut hair was neatly braided and draped over one shoulder, and she wore a simple dress of Elena's that had been taken in at the waist. Though still pale, her face had been cleansed of dirt, revealing a light dusting of freckles across her nose. "Mr. Drake," she said, her voice stronger than the night before. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Owen rose quickly, gesturing to a chair. "Not at all, Miss Zimmerman. Please sit down." "You should be resting." "I've rested enough for now." She moved into the room with careful steps, lowering herself into the offered chair. "I wanted to thank you properly for saving my life." Up close, Owen could see the shadows beneath her eyes and the way she held herself, as if conserving strength. Anyone would have done the same. A small, sad smile touched her lips. "We both know that isn't true, Mr. Drake, especially in these territories." There was a story there, Owen thought, but he wouldn't press. "Are you feeling better?" "Yes, thanks to you and Mrs. Vasquez. She's been very kind." Josephine's fingers twisted in her lap. "Mr. Drake, I find myself in a difficult position. I have no money, no possessions, and no immediate way to continue my journey." "Where were you headed?" Owen asked. "Denver. My aunt lives there, my only remaining family." Her voice hitched slightly before she steadied it. "I wired her from Sacramento before departing, but she won't know what's happened." Owen considered this. "Once you're stronger, I can take you to Cherry Creek. The telegraph office there can send a message to your aunt." Relief washed over her face. "Thank you. I promise I won't impose on your hospitality any longer than necessary." "You're welcome to stay until you're fully recovered," Owen assured her. "It's no imposition." Their conversation was interrupted by Miguel appearing at the door. "Señor, the cattle in the south pasture have broken through the fence again. 3 are missing." Owen sighed, rising from his desk. "Excuse me, Miss Zimmerman, duty calls." "Of course." She started to stand as well, then swayed slightly. Owen was at her side in an instant, his hand catching her elbow to steady her. "You should rest more. Elena has prepared the guest room properly now." Their eyes met, and for a moment, something passed between them, a current of awareness that surprised them both. Josephine was the first to look away, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Thank you, Mr. Drake. I believe I will lie down again." Owen watched her make her way carefully back to the guest room before following Miguel outside. The missing cattle were a problem, but not nearly as troubling as the unexpected effect Josephine Zimmerman's presence was having on his carefully ordered life. The days that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. Josephine regained her strength gradually, and by the end of the first week, she was insisting on helping Elena with household tasks. "I can't simply sit idle while everyone works around me," she declared when Owen found her in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up as she kneaded bread dough. "Most guests don't feel obligated to earn their keep," he pointed out, leaning against the doorframe. Josephine's hands never paused in their rhythmic movement. "I'm not most guests, Mr. Drake, and I wasn't raised to be idle." Owen was learning that beneath her refined exterior lay a stubborn streak and fierce independence that both impressed and frustrated him. "We'll ride into Cherry Creek tomorrow," he said. "You can send your wire then." She looked up, flour dusting her cheek. "Thank you." The trip to Cherry Creek the next day revealed more about Josephine's situation than she had previously shared. At the telegraph office, Owen respectfully gave her privacy, but couldn't help overhearing her conversation with the operator. Arrived safely in Nevada territory. "Delayed by unforeseen circumstances. Will require funds to continue journey," she dictated, then hesitated before adding, "Please sign it your loving niece, Josephine." The operator calculated the cost and Josephine's face fell. I don't have any money." Before she could say more, Owen stepped forward. "Add it to my account, Jim," he told the operator. Josephine turned to him, her expression a mix of gratitude and embarrassment. "Mr. Drake, I can't accept. Consider it a loan," he said quietly. "You can repay me when your aunt sends funds." Her chin lifted slightly. "I will, with interest." Their next stop was the sheriff's office, where Josephine gave a detailed description of the stagecoach robbery. Sheriff Tanner, a grizzled veteran of the frontier, took notes with a grim expression. "Sounds like the Blackwell gang," he confirmed. "Been hitting stages all over the territory. You're lucky to be alive, miss. Most witnesses don't walk away." "Have you had any success apprehending them?" Owen asked. The sheriff shook his head. They move too fast, know the territory too well. Army's been called in, but he shrugged, the gesture conveying his opinion of territorial military effectiveness. Josephine shivered slightly, and Owen noticed her pallor. We should head back, he suggested. You're still recovering. She didn't protest, which told him more about her condition than words could have. On the ride home, Owen found himself wondering about the circumstances that had brought such a refined young woman to this harsh territory alone. As if reading his thoughts, Josephine broke the silence. You must be curious about my story, Mr. Drake. He glanced at her, riding side saddle on a gentle mare he kept for occasional visitors. Only what you wish to share. She gazed at the distant mountains. My father was a banker in Philadelphia. When he died last year, we discovered he had made some unwise investments. My mother passed when I was young, and suddenly I found myself alone and nearly destitute. Her voice remained steady, but Owen could sense the effort it cost her. My aunt in Denver is my mother's sister. She offered me a home and perhaps employment as a teacher in the school where she serves as headmistress. That's a long journey to make alone. Josephine's smile was tinged with sadness. Women have few choices when circumstances change, Mr. Drake. I sold what remained of our possessions to purchase my ticket west. And now everything's gone, Owen said quietly. Not everything. There was steel in her voice now. I still have my education, my wits, and my determination. Those cannot be stolen. Owen found himself admiring her resilience. Many would have been broken by such misfortunes, yet here she sat, spine straight, eyes forward, planning her next steps. When they returned to the ranch, Alina greeted them with news that she'd prepared a special dinner to celebrate Josephine's improving health. The meal was a jovial affair, with Miguel sharing humorous stories of ranch mishaps that had Owen shaking his head and Josephine laughing until tears came to her eyes. Owen found himself watching her throughout the evening, the way her face transformed when she smiled, how her hands moved expressively as she spoke, the intelligence that shone in her eyes. It had been a long time since the ranch house had heard female laughter, and he was surprised by how much he enjoyed it. After dinner, when Miguel and Alina had returned to their cabin near the barn, Josephine and Owen sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Nevada sky. It's beautiful here, she said softly. So different from Philadelphia, the sky seems endless. It can be harsh too, Owen replied. Winter storms, summer drought, the land demands respect. Like most worthwhile things. She turned to look at him. You built all this yourself. Owen nodded, surveying his property with quiet pride. Came west after the war with nothing but my saddle and the clothes on my back. Worked as a hand on other ranches, saved every penny. Bought this land 7 years ago when it was nothing but scrub and rock. You were in the war. Josephine asked hesitantly, Union cavalry. His tone discouraged further questions on that topic. Some memories were best left undisturbed. She seemed to understand, changing the subject. How long do you think before I hear from my aunt? Could be a few days, depending on whether she's in Denver to receive your wire. Owen hesitated, then added, There's no rush, Miss Zimmerman. You're welcome here until arrangements can be made. In the silver moonlight, her profile was like something from a cameo brooch. You're very kind, Mr. Drake. Owen, he said impulsively. If we're to be sharing a roof, you might as well use my given name. She smiled, and something in his chest tightened. Then you must call me Josephine. The week that followed brought a new dimension to life at the Drake Ranch. Josephine integrated herself into the daily routine, insisting on contributing despite Owen's protests. She proved surprisingly capable in the kitchen, producing meals that made even Alina raise her eyebrows in appreciation. Where did you learn to cook like this? Owen asked one evening over a particularly delicious rabbit stew. Our cook in Philadelphia took pity on a curious child, Josephine explained. Father thought it improper for a banker's daughter to spend time in the kitchen, but Maggie said every woman should know how to prepare a decent meal, regardless of station. Maggie was wise, Owen commented, reaching for another piece of cornbread. Josephine smiled, pleased by his appreciation. I find I enjoy it. There's something satisfying about creating something that nourishes others. As her strength returned fully, Josephine began to explore the ranch. Owen found her one morning in the small library he'd accumulated over the years, running her fingers over the spines of his books. "You've quite a collection for a ranch in the middle of nowhere," she observed. "Books travel well," he replied. "And winter evenings are long here. Feel free to borrow anything that interests you." Her eyes lit up. "Truly, I've missed reading these past weeks. Truly." He pulled a volume from the shelf. "Have you read Thoreau?" She shook her head, and he placed the book in her hands. "I think you might appreciate his thoughts on self-reliance." Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and that same strange current passed between them. Owen stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they were standing in the small room. "Thank you," Josephine said softly, clutching the book to her chest. "For everything." The days stretched into a second week with no response from Denver. Josephine checked with the telegraph office whenever they went to town, but no message awaited her. Owen could see her growing concern, though she tried to hide it behind a cheerful demeanor. Perhaps the message never arrived, she fretted as they rode home after another fruitless check. "Or my aunt is away from Denver. We'll try again in a few days," Owen assured her. "These things take time out here." The truth was, Owen found himself in no hurry for a response. Josephine's presence had brought an unexpected warmth to his home. He enjoyed their evening conversations, the way she challenged his opinions without rancor, her quiet appreciation of the beauty surrounding his ranch. The thought of her departure left a hollow feeling he wasn't ready to examine too closely. Their growing connection didn't go unnoticed. Elena observed them with knowing eyes, occasionally making remarks in Spanish that made Miguel chuckle and Owen glare in warning. "She is good for you, senor," Elena said one afternoon as they watched Josephine hanging laundry on the line, her hair gleaming copper in the sunlight. "It has been too long since you allowed someone close," Owen frowned. "She's here temporarily, Elena. Her life is elsewhere." Elena merely smiled. "The heart does not always follow the plans we make, senor." Before Owen could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. 3 riders were approaching from the direction of Cherry Creek, dust rising behind them. Owen's hand moved instinctively to his hip, but he'd left his gun belt hanging by the door. "Miguel," he called, "fetch my Winchester from the house." Josephine looked up from her task, alarm crossing her features as she noted Owen's stance. "Go inside," he told her as Miguel returned with the rifle. "Probably nothing, but best to be safe." She hesitated only a moment before complying, gathering her skirts and moving quickly toward the house. The riders slowed as they approached, and Owen recognized the lead man as Sheriff Tanner. The tension in his shoulders eased somewhat, but not entirely. The sheriff rarely made social calls. "Afternoon, Drake," Tanner called, reining in his horse. "Sorry to disturb you, Sheriff." Owen nodded in greeting. "What brings you out this way?" Tanner dismounted, the other 2 men, one wearing a deputy's badge, the other in civilian clothes, remaining on horseback. "Got some news might interest your house guest. This here's Mr. Porter, came in on yesterday's stage from Sacramento." The civilian nodded politely. "Sir?" "What news?" Owen asked, his grip on the rifle relaxing but not releasing entirely. "Mr. Porter was on the same stage line, a day behind the one that was robbed," Tanner explained. "He brings word that the Army caught up with the Blackwell gang yesterday at Pyramid Lake, quite a shootout from what we hear." "Did they get them all?" Owen asked. "All but one," Porter interjected. "The leader, Jack Blackwell, escaped, but they got his brother and 3 others. Found some of the stolen property too." Owen processed this information, its implications for Josephine clear. "Miss Zimmerman will want to hear this. She may be able to identify some of her belongings." "That's what we figured," Tanner agreed. "Army's holding the recovered items at Fort Churchill. They're asking any victims to come forward." The front door opened, and Josephine appeared on the porch, her expression cautious. "Owen, is everything all right?" "It's fine," he assured her. "Sheriff Tanner has news about the stagecoach robbery." Josephine descended the steps and approached, maintaining a proper distance from the men. Owen quickly relayed what he'd been told, watching her face carefully. "My belongings might be recovered," Hope brightened her eyes. That would change everything. No guarantees, miss, Tanner cautioned, but it's worth checking. The fort's about 2 days' ride from here. When can we leave? She asked, turning to Owen with such immediate assumption that he would accompany her that it warmed something within him. We can set out tomorrow morning, he decided. If that's acceptable, Sheriff, Tanner nodded. Should work. I'll be heading that way myself. Can meet you on the main road at first light. After the sheriff and his companions departed, Josephine turned to Owen, her eyes shining. If my trunk is among the recovered items, I'll have my papers, my mother's locket, perhaps even some of my money. I could continue to Denver without having to wait for my aunt's response. The very outcome Owen had been trying not to think about now stared him in the face. That would be fortunate, he said, his voice neutral despite the sinking feeling in his chest. Josephine's excitement faltered as she studied his expression. Yes, it would be, she said, less certainly. Then, as if needing to fill the sudden awkward silence, she added, I should help Alina prepare for our absence. 2 days, you said. 2 there, 2 back, Owen confirmed. Pack accordingly. As she hurried to the house, Owen found himself wishing, for the first time in his life, that the army had been a little less efficient in their duties. The journey to Fort Churchill began at dawn the next day. Sheriff Tanner met them as planned, accompanied by his deputy and 2 other victims of the Blackwell gang's recent activities, a silver mine investor from San Francisco and a cattle buyer from Kansas City. Owen had prepared carefully for the trip, packing provisions, bedrolls, and extra ammunition. The territory between Cherry Creek and the fort wasn't particularly dangerous, but with Jack Blackwell still at large and likely seeking revenge, caution seemed prudent. Josephine rode beside him, wearing a divided riding skirt Alina had hastily altered from one of her own. The practical garment allowed her to ride astride, a necessity for the long journey. Owen couldn't help noticing how naturally she sat a horse, her posture easy and confident. You ride well, he commented as they fell into a steady pace behind the sheriff. She smiled. Father believed in a comprehensive education. Riding was considered an appropriate accomplishment for young ladies, even in Philadelphia. An appropriate accomplishment that's serving you well out here, Owen observed. Many things I learned for appearance's sake have proven unexpectedly practical. Her eyes twinkled with amusement. Though I doubt my piano playing will be of much use on the frontier. Don't be too sure. There's a saloon in Cherry Creek with a piano that hasn't been properly played in years. The first day's ride was uneventful, the group making good time across the Nevada landscape. They camped that night by a small stream, the men taking turns standing watch while Josephine slept wrapped in blankets near the fire. Owen took the first watch, settling on a rock outcropping that provided a good view of their surroundings. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky. He was surprised when Josephine approached, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders against the desert chill. Couldn't sleep? He asked as she settled beside him. She shook her head. Too many thoughts. Mind if I join you for a while? It's not very comfortable, he warned. I've discovered I'm more resilient than I once believed. She adjusted her blanket, gazing out at the moonlit landscape. It's beautiful, isn't it? In a stark, uncompromising way. Owen nodded. That's what I love about it. The land doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is. They sat in companionable silence for a time, the only sounds the soft murmur of the stream and the occasional call of a night bird. What will you do? Owen asked finally. If you recover your belongings, Josephine sighed softly. Continue to Denver, I suppose. It's the sensible course. My aunt has connections, can help me establish myself as a teacher. Is that what you want? She turned to look at him, her face silvered by moonlight. What I want and what's possible are often different things, Owen. I've learned that lesson well this past year. That doesn't answer my question. Josephine was quiet for so long he thought she might not respond. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I want a home, security, purpose, things that are hard for a woman alone to achieve, and Denver will provide those things. It offers the possibility. She drew the blanket tighter around her shoulders. What about you? Will you stay on your ranch forever? Owen hadn't considered any other option in years. It's my home. I built it from nothing. Why would I leave? No reason, she said quickly. It's a wonderful place. I just wondered if you ever felt lonely there. The question struck closer to home than he cared to admit. Before Josephine's arrival, he hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge the emptiness of his evenings, the silence that seemed to grow heavier with each passing year. I have Miguel and Alina, he said, knowing even as the words left his mouth how inadequate they sounded. Josephine's smile was gentle. They're wonderful people, but they have each other. There it was, the truth he'd been avoiding. Owen looked away, focusing on the distant horizon. It's late. You should try to sleep. We have another long day tomorrow. She rose gracefully, understanding his need to retreat. Good night, Owen. He watched her return to her bedroll, the blanket trailing behind her like a queen's train. Good night, Josephine, he murmured, too softly for her to hear. The second day of travel brought them to more populated areas, with scattered farms and mining camps along the route. By late afternoon, the walls of Fort Churchill came into view, the military outpost standing guard over the Carson River. They were greeted by a young lieutenant who escorted them to the commandant's office. Captain James Wilson was a career Army man with a no-nonsense demeanor that softened somewhat when Josephine entered. Madam, he acknowledged, offering her the single comfortable chair in his spare office. I understand you were a victim of the Blackwell gang. My sympathies for your ordeal. Thank you, Captain, Josephine replied. I'm told you've recovered some stolen property. Wilson nodded. Indeed, we've cataloged everything in the quartermaster's store. If you'll describe your items, we can check if they're among what was recovered. Josephine provided a detailed inventory, a large trunk with brass fittings and the initials JZ. Stamped on the lid, containing several dresses, books, personal papers, a silver locket with a miniature portrait inside, and a pouch with 20 gold double eagles, her entire worldly wealth. Wait here, the captain instructed, dispatching a corporal to check the recovered items. The wait seemed interminable. Owen found himself studying the captain's maps on the wall, noting the carefully marked locations of recent Blackwell gang activities. They had operated over a surprisingly large territory, from the California border east nearly to Utah. The corporal returned after 20 minutes, his expression giving nothing away. Sir, we've located a trunk matching the lady's description. Josephine gasped softly, hope lighting her features. Bring it here, Wilson ordered. Minutes later, two privates struggled in with a large trunk that Owen recognized immediately from Josephine's description. She rose from her chair, hands clasped tightly at her waist. That's mine, she confirmed as the soldiers set it down. May I? At the captain's nod, she knelt before the trunk, fingers trembling slightly as she opened the lid. Owen moved closer, watching as she sorted through the contents. Her relief was palpable as she withdrew a bundle of papers tied with ribbon, a few well-worn books, and several garments that had clearly been searched but left relatively intact. Her expression fell, however, as she reached the bottom of the trunk. The money's gone, she said quietly. And my mother's locket. The gang probably kept the valuables on them, Wilson explained. We're still searching for Blackwell. If we apprehend him, there's a chance more items will be recovered. Josephine nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. I'm grateful to have my papers and clothing back. It's more than I expected. The recovery of her trunk, even without the money, changed Josephine's circumstances significantly. She now had proper clothing, identification papers, and letters of introduction from her father's former colleagues in Philadelphia. What she lacked were the funds to continue her journey to Denver. I can wire my aunt again, she told Owen as they secured her trunk to his packhorse for the return journey. Now that I have my papers, I can arrange for funds to be transferred properly. Owen nodded, busying himself with the ropes to avoid meeting her eyes. The inevitable separation he'd been dreading now had a timeline, and he was surprised by how much the thought pained him. Their return journey began the next morning, Sheriff Tanner and the other victims having completed their business at the fort. The atmosphere between Owen and Josephine was subdued, each lost in their own thoughts about what would come next. They made camp that evening in a sheltered hollow, a small fire providing warmth against the desert night. Josephine had changed into one of her recovered dresses, a simple blue cotton that suited her far better than Alina's altered garments. "You look nice," Owen commented as he prepared their evening meal, a rabbit he'd shot along the trail. "Thank you." She smoothed the familiar fabric. "It feels strange to be back in my own clothes, like recovering a piece of myself." Owen nodded, understanding. They ate in comfortable silence, the stars emerging one by one in the darkening sky. "I've been thinking," Josephine said suddenly, "about what happens when we return to Cherry Creek." Owen braced himself for what would follow her plans to leave, to continue the journey that had been interrupted when she fainted in the dust outside town. "I don't have the funds yet to continue to Denver," she continued, "and it could be some time before arrangements can be made." "You're welcome to stay at the ranch until then," Owen said immediately. "As I've said before," Josephine's fingers worried the edge of her plate. "That's very generous, but I can't continue to impose on your hospitality without contributing something." "You've already been helping around the house, that's not enough," she interrupted. "I was thinking, the school in Cherry Creek, when we were in town last week, I noticed a sign saying they were seeking a teacher." Owen paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. "You want to teach at the Cherry Creek School?" She nodded, her expression determined. "It would allow me to earn my keep while waiting for funds from my aunt, and it's work I'm qualified to do." The implications washed over Owen. Josephine wouldn't be leaving immediately. She would be staying in Cherry Creek close enough to see regularly to continue whatever this was growing between them. "The position may already be filled," he cautioned, trying not to let his sudden hope show too plainly. "Perhaps, but I must try." Her eyes met his across the fire. "Would it be inconvenient? I could find lodging in town if no," Owen said quickly. "No, it wouldn't be inconvenient at all. The ranch is your home for as long as you need it." The word home hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than perhaps he'd intended. Josephine's smile was soft in the firelight. "Thank you, Owen." They returned to Cherry Creek 2 days later, the journey uneventful save for a brief summer thunderstorm that forced them to seek shelter beneath an overhanging cliff for several hours. The unexpected delay had thrown them into a strange intimacy, huddled together watching the rain pound the desert floor, the air charged with electricity that seemed to mirror the tension between them. Neither had spoken of it afterward, but something had shifted, a barrier lowered that could not be raised again. Their first stop in town was the telegraph office, where Josephine sent another message to her aunt, this one with more details about her situation and plans to seek temporary employment in Cherry Creek. Their next destination was the schoolhouse, a modest building at the edge of town. The sign Josephine had noticed was still posted on the door. "Teacher wanted. Inquire with town council." "The council meets at the saloon on Wednesday evenings," the telegraph operator had informed them. "That's tomorrow night." While Josephine prepared for her meeting with the town council, Owen attended to the ranch business that had been neglected during their journey. He returned from checking the south pasture to find her sitting at his desk, papers spread before her as she wrote diligently. "What are you working on?" he asked, hanging his hat on the peg by the door. "A curriculum proposal," she explained without looking up, "and a summary of my qualifications. I want to be prepared for any questions the council might have." Owen smiled at her thoroughness. "They'll be lucky to have you. Most teachers out here barely know more than their oldest students." She glanced up, her expression serious. "Education is crucial, especially in places like this. These children deserve more than the bare minimum." Her passion for teaching was evident in every word, every gesture. Owen found himself wondering what it would be like to have children of his own taught by someone like Josephine, someone who saw education as a calling rather than merely a job. The thought of children, of a family, caught him by surprise. He'd put such dreams aside years ago, focusing instead on building his ranch, creating a legacy of land rather than blood. Now, watching Josephine prepare so earnestly for her interview, those long-buried desires began to stir again. The town council meeting the following evening was held in the back room of the Silver Dollar Saloon. Owen accompanied Josephine, ignoring the raised eyebrows and speculative glances from the townspeople. Cherry Creek was small enough that her presence at his ranch had not gone unnoticed, though Alina's regular visits had prevented the worst of the gossip. The council consisted of 5 men: the mayor, who also owned the general store, the saloon keeper, the blacksmith, the town's only lawyer, and a successful miner who'd struck it rich and decided to settle rather than move on to the next strike. Josephine presented herself with quiet confidence, answering their questions clearly and presenting her credentials with neither false modesty nor arrogance. Owen watched from the back of the room, pride swelling in his chest at her composure. The deliberation was brief. Cherry Creek had been without a teacher for nearly 2 months, and none of the local women had both the education and the inclination to take on the role. Josephine was offered the position on the spot, with classes to begin the following Monday. "It's not much pay," the mayor warned. $50 a month, plus room and board at the Widow Johnson's boarding house. "Actually," Owen interjected, stepping forward, "Miss Zimmerman has arrangements for lodging already. She'll be staying at my ranch and riding in daily." The council members exchanged knowing looks, but no one commented directly on this arrangement. The West had its own morality, more practical than the rigid codes of Eastern society. A respectable woman could maintain her reputation even while living under a bachelor's roof, provided there were others present, like the Vasquez couple, and no overt impropriety. As they rode home through the gathering dusk, Josephine's excitement was palpable. "I can't believe they accepted me so readily. I'll have 26 students ages 6 to 16. The previous teacher left some materials, but I'll need to organize everything before Monday." Owen smiled at her enthusiasm. "The general store should have supplies." "We can return tomorrow to purchase what you need," she sobered slightly. "I won't be paid until the end of the month. I hate to ask for more credit. Consider it an investment in Cherry Creek's future," Owen interrupted. "You can repay me from your first wages if it matters so much." Josephine's grateful smile warmed him more than the summer evening. "It does matter. I've been dependent on others' charity too long already." Owen wanted to tell her that what he'd offered wasn't charity, that her presence in his home had given him more than he could possibly express, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he merely nodded his understanding. The following days were a whirlwind of activity as Josephine prepared for her new role. Owen took her to town as promised, where they purchased paper, pencils, chalk, and several books from the general store. The mayor's wife, learning of Josephine's appointment, donated a box of readers that had belonged to her now grown children. On Sunday evening, the night before her first day of teaching, Owen found Josephine on the porch, staring at the stars with an expression of nervous anticipation. "Can't sleep?" he asked, joining her on the wooden bench. She shook her head. "I keep thinking of all the things that might go wrong tomorrow. What if the children don't respect me? What if I can't maintain discipline?" "You'll do fine," Owen assured her. "These are good kids, mostly. A bit wild, perhaps, but eager to learn if given the chance." "Do you know many of them?" "Most of the ranching families," he confirmed. "The Sullivan boys can be handful, and little Emma Jones talks more than she listens, but they're decent children at heart." Josephine laughed softly. "You sound like you should be teaching them yourself." "God forbid," Owen said with feeling. "I have enough trouble managing grown men during roundup. A room full of children would be beyond my capabilities." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the night air cool against their skin. "Thank you," Josephine said suddenly, turning to face him, "for everything you've done. Finding me, taking me in, supporting this new venture. I don't know what would have happened if don't," Owen interrupted gently. "There's no need for thanks. Having you here, seeing you build a life for yourself despite everything you've faced, it's been an honor to witness." In the silver moonlight, her eyes shimmered with emotion. Owen, he wasn't sure who moved first. Perhaps they both leaned in simultaneously, drawn together by the force that had been building between them since the day he found her collapsed in the dust. Her lips were soft against his. hesitant at first, then yielding with a sweetness that made his heart ache. Owen's hand rose to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the delicate line of her jaw as the kiss deepened. Josephine's fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt, holding on as if afraid he might disappear. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "Why didn't you?" she whispered. "You needed time to heal, to find your footing." His thumb brushed across her lower lip. "And I needed to be sure this wasn't just gratitude on your part." Josephine leaned back slightly, meeting his gaze directly. "What I feel for you, Owen Drake, goes far beyond gratitude." The simple declaration sent warmth spreading through his chest. "And what exactly do you feel, Josephine Zimmerman?" Her smile was both shy and certain. "I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the night air between them, honest and unadorned. Owen drew a deep breath, suddenly aware that they stood at a crossroads. What he said next would set their course toward deeper connection or careful retreat. "I think," he said slowly, "that I've already fallen in love with you." Josephine's smile bloomed like a desert flower after rain, sudden and glorious. She leaned forward, initiating their second kiss with a confidence that made Owen's pulse race. This time when they parted, practical considerations reasserted themselves. "You should rest," Owen said reluctantly. "Tomorrow's an important day." Josephine nodded, though her fingers remained entwined with his. "We have much to talk about." "We do," he agreed, "but it can wait until you've conquered the schoolhouse." She laughed softly. A daunting challenge indeed. Owen walked her to her door, stealing one more brief kiss before bidding her good night. As he made his way to his own room, he marveled at the turn his life had taken. 6 weeks ago, he had been a solitary rancher with no thought beyond his next cattle drive. Now he found himself contemplating a future that included a sharp-minded schoolteacher with freckles across her nose and courage enough for 10 men. Josephine's first day of teaching was, by her own account, exhausting but exhilarating. She returned to the ranch that evening full of stories about her students, the bright ones, the troublemakers, the shy child who'd surprised her with a thoughtful question about geography. "They're hungry for knowledge," she told Owen over dinner. "Some of them have had so little formal education, but their minds are like sponges." Her passion for teaching was evident in every word, every gesture. Owen found himself falling even deeper under her spell, captivated by the way she came alive when discussing her students' potential. The days fell into a new rhythm. Owen would drive Josephine to town each morning in his buckboard, using the opportunity to conduct ranch business while she taught. In the evenings, they would return together, the journey becoming a cherished time for conversation away from curious eyes. Their relationship deepened with each passing day. Stolen kisses became a regular occurrence, though both were careful to maintain propriety, especially in public. Cherry Creek was small enough that gossip spread quickly, but the presence of the Vasquez couple as chaperones prevented the worst of the speculation. 2 weeks into Josephine's teaching position, she received a reply from her aunt in Denver. Owen was working in the barn when she found him, letter in hand, her expression troubled. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, setting aside the saddle he'd been repairing. Josephine handed him the letter. "My aunt is ill, influenza. She writes that she cannot receive me until she recovers, which her doctor suggests may be months rather than weeks." Owen scanned the carefully written pages, noting the genuine regret in the older woman's words. "She seems concerned for you." "She is. Aunt Margaret has always been kind." Josephine took the letter back, folding it carefully. "She suggests I remain where I am until spring, when travel will be easier and her health hopefully restored." The implication was clear. Josephine would be staying in Cherry Creek for the foreseeable future. Owen tried to suppress the surge of joy this news brought him, aware that it came at the cost of her aunt's illness. "Are you disappointed?" he asked cautiously. Josephine met his gaze steadily. "About my aunt's illness, yes, about staying here." She stepped closer, resting her hand on his arm. "I find I'm not disappointed at all." Owen covered her hand with his own. "I'm glad. Selfish as it may be, I'm not ready to say goodbye to you, Josephine Zimmerman." Her smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Then perhaps we won't have to, Owen Drake. The autumn months brought changes to both the ranch and their relationship. Josephine settled fully into her role as Cherry Creek schoolteacher, earning the respect of both her students and their parents. Her dedication was evident in the hours she spent preparing lessons and the individual attention she gave to each child, regardless of background or ability. Owen, meanwhile, found himself viewing his ranch with new eyes. The house that had always seemed adequate for a bachelor now revealed its shortcomings. He began making improvements, adding curtains to the windows, replacing the battered furniture in the parlor, expanding the garden at Josephine's suggestion. "You're nesting," Miguel observed one afternoon as they constructed bookshelves for the small library. "Like the birds in spring." Owen didn't deny it. The ranch was transforming, becoming the home he'd always envisioned but never quite achieved on his own. As winter approached, bringing cooler temperatures and the promise of snow in the mountains, Owen found himself considering the future more seriously than he had in years. The ranch was prosperous, his cattle healthy, the land productive. He had built a good life, a life that would be infinitely richer with Josephine by his side permanently. The thought of marriage, once so distant, now occupied his mind with increasing frequency. They had spoken of their feelings, shared dreams and histories, built a foundation that felt solid beneath their feet. Yet he hesitated to take the final step, wanting to be certain Josephine chose him freely, not from convenience or gratitude. The decision was made for him on a crisp November afternoon. They had ridden to a hilltop overlooking the ranch, a favorite spot for weekend picnics when weather permitted. The valley spread below them, golden in the autumn light, the creek a silver ribbon winding through cattle-dotted pastures. "It's beautiful," Josephine said, gazing at the landscape. "You've built something remarkable here, Owen. It feels more complete with you in it," he replied honestly. She turned to him, her cheeks pink from the cool air. "I received another letter from my aunt yesterday." Owen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "How is her health?" "Improving. She writes that by spring she should be well enough to receive me." Josephine's expression was carefully neutral. "She's still offering me a position at her school." The moment he'd been dreading had arrived. Owen took a deep breath, knowing what he said next would determine their future. "Will you go?" he asked quietly. Josephine looked out over the valley again, her profile etched against the blue sky. "That depends." "On what?" She met his gaze, her eyes reflecting both vulnerability and determination. "On whether I have sufficient reason to stay." The air between them seemed to vibrate with unspoken words. Owen knew with sudden clarity that this was his moment, the moment to lay his heart bare and ask for what he truly wanted. He took her hands in his. "Josephine Zimmerman, when I found you that day outside Cherry Creek, I thought I was saving your life. I didn't realize you would end up saving mine." Her eyes widened slightly, but she remained silent, waiting. "Before you came, I existed," Owen continued. "I worked, I built this ranch, I measured success in acres and cattle, but I wasn't truly living." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "You've brought light and laughter into my home. You've challenged me, supported me, made me see possibilities I'd long ago dismissed." Josephine's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Owen," he pressed on, needing to say everything in his heart before courage failed him. "I love you, Josephine. I love your strength, your kindness, your determination. I love watching you with your students, seeing how you nurture their minds the way you've nurtured my heart." With deliberate movements, Owen lowered himself to one knee, still holding her hands in his. "I don't want to be the reason you give up your dreams, but I'm hoping with all my heart that I might become part of those dreams." He swallowed hard. "Will you marry me, Josephine? Will you build a life here with me, teach our children as well as Cherry Creek's, grow old beside me in the home we create together?" A single tear traced its way down Josephine's cheek, but her smile was radiant. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Owen Drake, I will marry you." Joy surged through him, powerful enough to make his hands tremble as he rose to his feet and gathered her in his arms. Their kiss was a promise, a pledge more binding than any formal vows. When they finally parted, Josephine kept her arms around his neck. I need you to understand something, she said earnestly. I'm not choosing you over my dreams. This life we can build together. You're part of a dream I didn't even know I had until I fainted in the dust outside Cherry Creek. Owen brushed another tear from her cheek. Are you sure? Denver offers opportunities that Cherry Creek can't match. I'm sure, she affirmed. Teaching here matters. These children need me, and more importantly, I need this place, this life. I need you. They were married on Christmas Day in the small church in Cherry Creek. The building filled to capacity with townsfolk, neighboring ranchers, and Josephine's students. Elena had helped sew Josephine's wedding dress, a creation of ivory silk that had been ordered from San Francisco and arrived just days before the ceremony. Owen, standing at the altar in his best suit, felt his breath catch as Josephine walked down the aisle toward him, her face radiant behind a simple veil. Miguel, serving as best man, nudged him gently. Breathe, amigo, he whispered. She is not a dream that will disappear. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, the couple exchanging vows they had written themselves. Josephine promised to be his partner in all things, to build their home and family with love and respect. Owen vowed to cherish her independence even as he protected her, to support her calling as she supported his. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in cheers, the celebration continuing long into the night at a reception held in the town hall. They had discussed delaying a honeymoon until summer when travel would be easier, but Owen surprised Josephine with news that he had arranged for a substitute teacher for the first 2 weeks of January. We're going to San Francisco, he told her as they rode home from the reception. I've booked passage on the train from Reno and reserved rooms at the Palace Hotel. Josephine's delight made any expense worthwhile. Owen, how did you manage all that without my knowing? Small towns have their advantages, he replied with a smile. Everyone was eager to help keep the secret. Their honeymoon was a whirlwind of new experiences for both of them. Neither had visited San Francisco before, and they explored the city with the enthusiasm of children, visiting theaters, museums, and restaurants far more elegant than anything Cherry Creek could offer. Yet for all the city's attractions, what Owen treasured most were the quiet moments in their hotel room, Josephine's head on his shoulder as she read aloud from a newly purchased book. Her hair spread across his pillow in the moonlight, her hand seeking his as they walked along the harbor watching ships from distant ports. They returned to Cherry Creek renewed, ready to begin their married life in earnest. Winter gave way to spring, the ranch flourishing under their combined care. Josephine continued teaching, but now rode to town on her own horse, a wedding gift from Owen. Evenings were spent in comfortable companionship, planning improvements to the ranch house and discussing the children who would someday fill it with laughter. In late April, Josephine received a letter from her aunt, now fully recovered, congratulating them on their marriage and expressing her hope to visit in the summer. The letter included a generous wedding gift, enough money to build the additional bedroom they'd been discussing and to purchase new books for Cherry Creek School. Summer brought new activity to the ranch. Owen's cattle herd had increased, requiring additional hands for the fall roundup. Josephine, now confident in her role as a rancher's wife as well as a teacher, managed the household with a quiet efficiency that impressed even Elena. She is a natural, Elena told Owen as they watched Josephine directing the new cook they'd hired to help with the expanded household. As if she was born to this life, not the city. Owen nodded, pride swelling in his chest. She adapts. It's one of the many things I love about her. As autumn approached again, bringing with it the anniversary of Josephine's arrival in Cherry Creek, she shared news that made Owen's heart soar. They were expecting their first child, due in the early spring. The pregnancy brought changes to their routine. Josephine continued teaching through December, but as winter settled over the valley, she reluctantly turned her classroom over to a young woman from Sacramento who'd responded to their advertisement. It's only temporary, Owen assured her as she packed away her teaching materials. You'll be back with your students before you know it. Josephine smiled, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her abdomen. with an additional student of my own. The winter passed peacefully, the ranch house warm and secure against the snow that occasionally blanketed the valley. They spent evenings planning for the baby, converting the small room adjacent to their bedroom into a nursery. Owen proved surprisingly skilled at woodworking, crafting a cradle from cherry wood that brought tears to Josephine's eyes when he presented it to her on Valentine's Day. Their son, William Owen Drake, was born on a clear March morning in 1877, his lusty cries announcing his arrival to the world. Owen, pacing anxiously outside the bedroom during Josephine's labor, nearly collapsed with relief when Alina emerged with the news that both mother and child were healthy. When he entered the bedroom, the sight of Josephine cradling their newborn son burned itself into Owen's memory, a perfect moment of joy that he knew he would carry with him for the rest of his days. "He's beautiful," Owen whispered, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed, "just like his mother." Josephine smiled tiredly, her face glowing despite the exhaustion of labor. "Would you like to hold your son, Mr. Drake?" With hands that trembled slightly, Owen accepted the small bundle, marveling at the perfection of tiny fingers and the shock of dark hair that promised to match his own. "Hello, William," he murmured. "Welcome to the world, son." The baby yawned, eyes still tightly closed, one hand escaping the blanket to curl reflexively around Owen's finger. The simple gesture filled his chest with an emotion too powerful for words. Life adjusted to accommodate their new addition. Josephine proved as natural a mother as she had been a teacher, handling the challenges of parenthood with the same determination she brought to everything. By summer, she was ready to resume teaching part-time, bringing William with her to the schoolhouse 3 days a week. The arrangement worked well, with the older students delighting in helping care for teacher's baby during breaks. William thrived in the stimulating environment, his curious eyes taking in everything around him. As their son's first birthday approached, Owen and Josephine sat on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and purple. William slept peacefully in his mother's arms, exhausted from a day of new adventures. "I was thinking," Owen said, his arm around Josephine's shoulders, "that we might expand the house next summer, add a proper library and perhaps another bedroom." Josephine smiled, leaning into his embrace. "Planning for the future, Mr. Drake, always, Mrs. Drake." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "A future that seemed impossible before you fainted in the dust outside Cherry Creek." "The best misfortune of my life," she agreed softly. "Do you ever regret it?" Owen asked. "Not continuing to Denver, the life you might have had there." Josephine looked out over the ranch, their home, their legacy, the future they were building together. "Not for a moment," she said with absolute conviction. "This is where I was meant to be. With you, with William, with whatever other children may come our way." "Speaking of which," Owen said carefully, noting the particular glow in his wife's cheeks that had been present for the past few weeks. "Is there something you'd like to tell me?" Josephine's surprise gave way to laughter. "How did you know? I only confirmed it myself yesterday." "A husband notices things," he replied, his hand moving to rest gently over her still flat stomach. "When, November, Dr. Patterson thinks." Her eyes shone with happiness. "William will have a brother or sister before his 2nd birthday." Owen gathered his family closer, his heart full beyond measure. From the lowest moment of Josephine's life collapsed in the dust with nowhere to go, had grown this abundance of love and hope. It was, he reflected, a miracle as vast as the Nevada sky above them and as enduring as the mountains that cradled their valley home. "I love you," he whispered against her hair, "more than I can ever say." Josephine turned her face up to his, her smile holding all the promise of their shared tomorrow. "Then show me," she replied softly, "every day for the rest of our lives." And he did.